Welcome to LexMedia's Coffee with the Candidates. I'm Colleen Smith, and I'm joined today by Jim Shaw. Jim, thank you for joining me today at the Coffee with the Candidates.
I'm happy to be here with you today, Colleen, the second time we're doing this. And I remember talking with folks afterwards. People were quite pleased. Felt that it was a way to really become informed before the election. So
get to know the
glad we can
candidates.
do this. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, today we are going to be joined by the candidates that are running for Selectmen and School Committee. This is an important year as we are looking for a new superintendent. We're addressing overcrowding issues in the schools, tax rates, and so much more. We have an important election happening on November 4th. We hope you enjoy meeting the candidates in this forum and that you will get out and vote.
We're here with Suzie Barry. Welcome, Suzie.
Suzie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
For being with us today. And what I want to do is I just want to mention a little bit about what you've done in the past, your commitment to the community, and some of the experience you have, and then I'll ask you to talk a little bit about why you want to be on the Board of Selectmen. So I'll start with Town Celebrations Chair. I had the pleasure of serving with you in Town Celebrations Committee, and maybe you can even mention a little bit of what that's all about, because I find it to be one of the most exciting committees in town. You were a member of Town Meeting for a period of time, where you also served as treasurer of the Town Meeting Members Association. You've been involved with the Safe Routes to School program, and I know that's become a very, very important program. You've been a Boy Scout den leader, and active on the Sidewalk Committee here in Lexington. So there's the resume. So tell us, Suzie, why now? You've served us so well in all these other capacities. Why is it important for you to be on the Board of Selectmen at this time?
So I've served on Celebrations Committee for almost 20 years. Prior to that, I was on as a town meeting member for 4 years. I was in town meeting when I was pregnant with my first son. I have 2 boys, one who's a sophomore in college, the second's a sophomore in high school. And then when I was pregnant with my second son, I decided it was time to resign, stay at home, childcare issues, because my husband worked nights at the time. So then I shifted my work to committee work, working for the Celebrations Committee. And I've been on the Celebrations Committee, as you said, for close to 20 years. It's time for me to move on. I grew up in town. I love this town. I care about what goes on in town and what the future is going to be. And I feel that I can bring my skill set as being a good problem solver, a listener, concerned about all the stakeholders and making sure everyone in the room gets heard, to the Board of Selectmen and help them with the many issues that are in front of them. On the Celebrations Committee, you asked for more information about that. It is near and dear to my heart. There are times that I call it my third child. The Celebrations Committee is a Selectmen appointed committee, and we're charged with planning the observances for Patriots' Day, Memorial Day, and Veterans Day. We have most recently added Dance Around the World, which was one of the most successful events of the 300th anniversary. So that will be taking place in March of 2015. The Selectmen are committed to that. They voted it last spring as a sign of their commitment to the diversity in town. So that will be in every other year event under the committee. We also just got the Martin Luther King Day celebration. Last week at the Selectmen's meeting, they voted that, so that will be under the auspices of the Town Celebrations Committee as well.
And now you've been involved with that on the periphery for some time, on the Martin Luther King event in the past. Like, I thought the Celebrations Committee was somewhat involved with working with them in the past. They actually
were, I believe they were under the Human Rights Committee.
Oh, okay.
And they were looking for a better home for them. Someplace where they'd have access to a lot more volunteers. Last year they did a big day of community service that was very successful. Yeah, so they're looking to do something like that again.
Right. And I think it's probably a better fit with you folks too, or with the Celebrations Committee.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Well, Suzie, one of the things you, in talking about your experience and being so involved in Lexington, you've talked about the Lexington government and the need to be inclusive and really looking at local leaders and having this kind of common sense approach. How would you suggest or implement that if elected the next selectman?
I think the important part there is conversation. Today's world is starting to go so fast and it's becoming so electronic. I know my kids are far more into electronic media and social media than we are. And I think it's taking the time to sit down and have the conversation with people one-on-one, and to find out what the issue is, talk it through with them, talk to all the stakeholders, circle back when a decision's made, and even after that, as the process goes on, to make sure that you've identified all the issues and there's open communication going on, that it's a two-way street.
Okay.
So I think that's important.
And one of the other things in a recent article that you'd talked about, and I think parlaying on what you just discussed, is this idea of a Lexington community partnership. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what that is, what the group would look like, and who the major stakeholders would be.
Sure. This is modeled after something I've seen in another town, and it's very successful there. And what it does is you take some of the key departments in Lexington, for instance, the library, recreation, the senior center, the schools, police, fire, DPW, and they send a representative to this meeting. And on the other side, you take community groups, not town committees. You take your community groups, the Lions Club, the Rotary, the Chinese American Association, the newcomers, Interfaith, the PTA, the head of the PTAs, and you meet once a month for 1 hour, and everyone goes, how can you get anything done in an hour? It's a very tightly scripted meeting, and basically what it is, it's a two-way information sharing session. So for instance, if Colleen, if you were representing the PTAs and you had an event going, you would report on the events going on at different schools. And if Jim was there representing DPW, he would find out what support you might need from DPW in terms of horses or whatever. Or if there was going to be a parking issue, the police would be in the room and they'd hear that ahead of time. What this partnership would also do is it would open up interpersonal relationships. So on your committee or in your department, if you have a question or issue, you would know who to call. This became very clear to me when we were working on the 300th anniversary celebration, and we moved the big parade to Sunday. And we approached the interfaith community because they said, oh my God, the big parade on Sunday, what are we going to do? And we worked great with them hand in hand. They were very supportive of us and we of them. But at one of the meetings, they approached me about a town issue. And they said, we need to talk to you about this particular issue. And I was quite taken aback because they assumed I worked for the town. I said, no, I'm just a volunteer. And they said, we don't know who to go talk to. And I found that very surprising, that in a town, 16 square miles, we're a big town, but we're a small town, they didn't know who to call. So if you were able to form this partnership, they would know who to call, and they'd have that relationship. And then, God forbid, something awful happened in town, that community partnership could pull together.
And really work together.
And work together, yeah.
Sure.
Well, one of the issues that we had talked with the other candidate that's running is so many of these major issues that are affecting selectmen in the next 3 to 5 years, one being the search for superintendent, as well as the overcrowding in the schools that's happening and the forecasting of where we're looking in the next couple years. How would you suggest, those are two separate issues, why don't we talk a little bit about the schools and the capital expenditures around the schools and the master building plan, and what would you suggest?
Sure. We have multiple capital issues that are coming up before us in the next few years, and they need to be prioritized, and that's always difficult. Many people have moved here for the schools. They want to see their children in schools that are adequately sized where they can get the programs that they need. But we also have town buildings that are in quite disrepair and decay, and frankly have antiquated systems and are basically sick buildings that need to be replaced. When I was in town meeting 20 years ago, we were talking about replacing the fire station, and it didn't happen then. It's come back to the forefront to do that. And I believe, the town needs to make the commitment that we're going to go forward with these projects and put it in the hands of the voters to decide. If they truly feel that these projects are worthy, that they're part of who we are as a town. I look at it as we are one whole town. We aren't just schools. We aren't just municipal. We're here because we love the town. We love the schools. We love the municipal things. We love the open space. We love the recreation. We love everything the town has to offer. And sometimes you have to make difficult decisions when you prioritize.
Right. Well, let me just follow up.
Sure.
On the issue of the fire station and the police department. It's been backburnered for some time. Now, your position on a new fire station is, it should be a priority. I just want to get this straight. Okay, so, but you're not necessarily saying that the decision should be made by the voters. I was confused because you're saying.
No, what I personally feel is that the new fire station is a priority, and that should it come before the board, and I hope it will, that the board, that I would support it, and the board should send it to town meeting if it's going to be a debt exclusion override, and then it should go out to the voters. Exactly.
Right. Now, and then there's one kind of follow-up question. We have we have limited land resources. There's been some talk about the possibility of maybe doing employing eminent domain. How do you feel about that?
I'm not sure the town has ever done eminent domain. I think if they have, maybe it's only been once. I haven't been able to get good facts on that. I think it's a difficult situation, but when you look at the amount of space that's needed for a new fire station, programmatically and storage-wise and everything else, they need twice the space they're in now. And where they are now, you can't build that where they are now. Same with the police station. There isn't. In the fire station, the fire department is they have to be able to respond to certain places in town within a certain number of minutes, under the national NFPA guidelines. So that really restricts where they can put fire headquarters. So then if you start thinking, what's the available space? What could they possibly take for eminent domain? That decision would lie within the board to decide. And it might go through and it might not.
How do you feel about it?
Right now, I'm mixed, but I really think if that's the way to get the project done, then that's the step we're going to have to take. It's not going to be the easiest step to take,
Right.
But we do need to have a building that is properly built, is safe for the people that work there, has adequate access in terms of disability. You can't get to the second floor in the fire station. There's no elevator.
Right.
We've reinforced the apparatus floor several times so that the equipment, multi-million dollars worth of equipment, doesn't fall into the basement. They're storing things outside in trailers.
Right.
So it's a difficult decision. None of these capital decisions are going to be easy.
Right. And this holds true for the police department as well. I mean,
same thing for them. Same thing for them.
They've far outgrown the space that they use right now.
Oh yeah, and the antiquated systems in both. I've toured both buildings with the chiefs, and it's really amazing to see how they can make it work for them. Right. And I would say the interesting thing is that I'm not running for any, there's no really particular large burning issue that I see right now, except the capital issue is going to become a very large issue for a lot of people.
Right.
And I think
we've got the community center, we've now been making improvements to Cary Hall.
Yeah.
And I think that there are people out there saying it's now time to move forward with public safety. And
it is time to move forward for that, but as Colleen mentioned earlier, we need to consider the schools as well.
Right.
They got their report last week about their enrollment projections. They're looking at 600, possibly 650 children over the next 5 years. That's a lot. They've got schools that are overcrowded,
right.
And they can't deliver the service that they want to.
Right.
So hopefully the school committee is going to be meeting, and they're going to be figuring out, the best way to use their space, maybe repurpose some space, and that would be great, because that's a short-term fix.
Right.
Estabrook was built in 30 months because it was an emergency.
Right.
My understanding is to build a new elementary school would be at a minimum of 4 years. So that you got to factor all that into it as well.
Okay. Let me just, before we get too far away, we were talking about public safety. You're married to a patrolman in Lexington.
I am.
And I just wanted to ask you what your thoughts are in terms of potential conflict of interest. He's a paid employee of the town of Lexington.
Yep.
And should anybody have any questions about the impropriety of such a thing, I just thought I'd throw it up to you to comment.
It's an excellent question, and I have been getting it when I've been out talking with people. I will tell you, when I decided back in July to run, the second phone call I made was to the State Ethics Commission to find out from them what my potential conflict of interest was. And what they told me at the time was, should I be successful, I would not be allowed to vote on any of the contracts relating to the police department. And probably more than just the one that would cover his union, because I believe they have reopener clauses between all the other unions. And then should I be successful, I should definitely get in touch with them, and they would write a letter. When I decided I was going to run, I met with the town manager, Carl Valente, and told him I had done this. And Carl shared with me that he has worked in a different community with someone who, on the board there, spouse worked for the library. So they were able to structure their selectmen's meetings that when they dealt with that issue, they put it at the very end of the agenda, and that person just left early for the evening. He didn't see it as being an issue.
Right.
And I've sat with the chief, and we've had a similar discussion.
Well, it's good to address that and get that out there.
Yeah.
So one of the other questions I wanted to ask is, in addition to the capital expenditures moving forward, but also how can Lexington work to retain and attract businesses in our commercial area here in Lexington? What would you suggest as a selectman?
Well, I think you have two different ways to look at it. I think you have the downtown business district, and I know what's on the minds of a lot of the voters, because I've been hearing it out talking to people, is the number of banks. And I think that issue lies within, it's an issue for the landlords. It's also an issue for our zoning bylaws, and taking a look at our zoning bylaws to see if there's anything we can do to adjust those, to possibly limit the number of banks or limit the amount of space that banks can rent or something like that. But what I'm hearing is landlords like stable long-term people to lease, and a bank is a stable long-term person to lease. I mean, one idea I've floated, and I don't even know if it's legally possible, is, the banking industry will kill me for this, is as you go to the mall and there's the food court, why couldn't we just make a bank court? And you could walk into one place and there'd be all the different, tellers, and there are your banks right there, and then you could have great shops or great restaurants. It's just a thought. It's probably not legal, but I'm trying to think outside the box.
Thinking outside the box.
Yeah, and the other part of it too is the commercial district, and I know the town.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask you about that, because we talked with Mr. Rotberg about this, and there's been a lot of talk about you know, several years ago, the last few years, I should say, there's been a lot of initiative to increase the FAR, the floor area ratio along Hartwell Avenue. And I know they're doing the sidewalk projects, and there's a lot of now ability to walk around in that area. They've got food trucks coming in. I know Melissa Tentopoulos from the Economic Development Office has really worked hard to create transportation resources so that people can link up with Alewife. But it doesn't seem like the landlords, the building owners, are actually taking advantage of the FAR and the increase in the FAR and building up. Can we be proactive and more proactive about going out and talking to landlords? And then, as a follow-up, over on Hayden Ave, there's been some proposal about expanding existing, space for business and industry along there. How do you feel about that? You know, like I think there's a current business there that's maybe requesting expansion along Hayden Avenue, and which would obviously add to an increase in commercial tax commercial tax base. Yeah. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that. Sure.
Well, first of all, I think Melissa has done a great job in terms of the economic development officer for the town, between the things she's done on Hartwell Ave and the things they've done on Hayden. You know, bringing in the shuttle from Alewife. They're now working on a shuttle from, I believe it's New Hampshire, to come down Route 3. I mean, as we know, traffic is not getting any better anywhere, anytime fast.
Not on Route 3 either.
No, not on 128. And everyone has a GPS nowadays. So I think it's important that the town continue its outreach to landlords to see what we can do to find out what their issues might be, why they're resistant to increase their FAR. You know, there's been a huge push to add biotech to town, which is great. You know, we're hearing that people, there's a lot of biotech in Cambridge, but now they're moving out this way. And why not welcome them with open arms? It's a great town. You know, we've got 95 or 128 and Route 2. We're at the perfect place to encourage all those businesses to come in.
Sure.
Yeah.
And in terms of Hayden Ave, a little bit of additional growth in there, you think it's a good thing? If we have to have it,
I think if it fits, if it fits within the area. I know there are parts of Hayden Ave that are very close to the neighborhoods, and there are some that are close to the conservation land. So for me, it would be a case of, where it fits exactly.
So a case-by-case basis, take a look at it?
I think so. To see what fits right for the landscape. You've got to take that into consideration too.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to ask, and then I'll throw it back over to you, if you should be successful, you'd be standing for re-election in 2016, because this is to fill the vacancy of Deb Marger, our former chair. And you fully committed to run for re-election?
Yes.
If you win, okay.
Yes.
Good.
Well, it's been very nice sitting down and talking with you. I guess I would like to ask maybe more on a personal level. With the campaign trail can be, I know, very exhausting at times, but also enlightening. What would you say has been one of the more positive experiences that you've been through on this journey?
I think it's been sitting with people and talking. In scheduling wise, I'll schedule an X number of, an hour and a half to sit down and talk with someone, and it's been going twice as long. People are just so anxious to talk and share their issues and their concerns and think outside of the box, and it's just been invigorating, in putting out ideas that I had never thought of that are concerns of them.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, we want to thank you for joining us here at the Inn at Hastings Park, Artistry on the Green, where our gracious host, Trish Perez-Keneally, has opened her doors for our little sort of coffee with the candidates segment. So we want to thank her for that, but we want to thank you for joining us, and we want to wish you the very best in your election.
Thank you very much, Jim, and happy birthday, Colleen.
Thank you, Suzie.